Welcome back to Unpolished Player in Business. Today, we're going to talk something about digital transformation, but with some new perspectives you've never heard. Today, our guest is Mike. Mike, could you introduce you a little bit to our audience?
Okay, so I'm Michael Guy. I am founder and principal consultant at Kingsbury Consulting. I've been working in pure digital, for nearly 20 years. And I've worked with businesses of all shapes and sizes, from very small micro businesses through small to medium enterprises, SMEs, all the way up to large enterprise level organisations, and across a whole range of different industries as well. So e-commerce, the automotive sector and manufacturing, the charity and membership sector, so lots of the third sector, and the public sector as well, so dealing with government organisations. So a real wide mix of different types of clients.
So for those clients, you mentioned a lot, and they're from different sectors, industries. But if you have to summarize some common things, what would you say?
I think that every business is too busy doing business to think carefully about the future and how to plan for the future effectively. And I see that in all organisations, and it actually gets worse the bigger an organisation gets, because there are more stakeholders, more stakeholder groups. The costs involved in planning for the future and putting strategies in place for the future get bigger.
Can we understand it in another way, like for a small business, or let's say small and medium business, they may be going to have a bigger impact by this digital transformation in a short term, maybe?
I think that's a really good sort of summary of it, yes. So a lot of what I do is to create strategies that deliver impact. And actually the impact often for a large organisation, they tend to think about big projects or big programmes of work to get big impact. But quite often what we see with them, and this translates to very small businesses, that it's the simple things that get the most tangible results, the things that actually matter to you now and which you can use to build and grow upon for foundations for the future.
So let's go back to a more fundamental question about what is digital transformation, because I think for a lot of people, especially for some young employees, you might be heard of these words for like thousands of times. You feel like you kindly know what is the meaning, but you're not, very clear about that. So today, I think it would be a best chance to ask your favor about this. And my weird question is, if you have to explain it to a 15-year-old kid about digital transformation, what would you say to make it like more easily for?
Yeah. So digital transformation is a step in a very long process. It's not the only step. And the first part of that is to digitize processes, documentation, ways that you engage with a customer base or your internal stakeholders. So digitization is taking all of your paper-based documents and scanning them, taking all of your photographs and scanning them. You digitize those and you put those into storage. So there's a benefit to you for doing that. You save on space. You don't have lots of paper sitting around and gathering dust, and it then becomes easier to find it. So the next stage is digitalization. And digitalization is where you put a digital process in place to use those digitized products or assets. So a digitalized process would be a search function in your storage box. So I've scanned all my photos, I've scanned all my documents, I now put a search function in and tags, and that's digitalized the process of looking through them. So I can start to think, I want to find a picture of a product that I'm trying to sell, And so I've got the tags, I've got the product descriptions. It makes it much easier for me to get hold of that. Digital transformation is where you put in place a process that radically rethinks that search function. So it either becomes something that happens where the customer is performing the search rather than you, or there is an automatic feed from another system which does that search. So, for example, I'm logging onto a website and I want to find a data sheet for a product that you're selling, or I want to find the ingredients list or allergens list for something on your menu. And I, as an end user, can find that information by interacting with different systems digitally, which then fires off processes, which interrogates this storage box. So it's the end result of a series of actions, the digitization, so uploading everything into a digital format, digitalization, which is then applying digital processes to it. Transformation is changing the way that those processes work to make them even more effective and to completely change the way that your business operates as well.
And another thing is, I always heard people, when they talk about digital transformation, they talk about strategy. What's the two things relationships? Why people always relate them together?
A strategy is a series of outcomes that you want to achieve. And it's really important to frame it like that. If you don't think about it in terms of outcomes and you just frame it as tasks, then it just becomes a to-do list. And that to-do list never really goes away. Whereas if you're always aiming towards outcomes, then you can say quite clearly when you are making progress towards an outcome. And that the measurement becomes different. Instead of saying, I've done 10 tasks off my to-do list in order to implement a system, you can say, I have only done 2 things off my to-do list, but I've improved the speed we can service our customers by 50% already. And so that becomes an outcome, and that becomes something that you can say, do we need to continue? Because actually, if we do everything else on the list, are we going to close that gap by another 50%? Is it going to cost more to continue than the value that we get or the impact that we get? It allows you to think carefully about how to measure the effort and the impact and the outcome, and be able to make decisions as you go along, rather than just saying, I need to do 10 items and at the end I might have achieved 100% growth. You don't know. And this is really, I think, key to a strategy is we don't know where we will get to. We have an understanding of the desired outcome, but we need to also be able to say we're now spending too much time trying to close the last 10-15%, and the effort that it's going to take is going to be far more than the reward that we get for it. And that, again, applies to businesses of all sizes. So you can make, as you say, a lot of impact very quickly with very easy changes, but it becomes diminishing returns the more that you do. So you need to have some document in
It's like
place.
the decision-making system.
And that is exactly it. It's a decision-making system, and it allows you to be able to say, we have done enough, and move on to the next thing.
And I think for a lot of people, the initial idea when they heard of digital transformation, they're thinking of more like traditional, conventional industry. They want to, adjust their working pace, working flow to this new era. But I think there is a myth in there. Some internet companies, although their DNA is made on the internet, it's like digital thing, but they still need digital transformation, right? But can you explain it more details to make people break this myth?
The assumption then is that by just purely being built digitally first, that the internet doesn't change, but the internet changes faster than any of us can keep up with. And so if you're an e-commerce business and you don't have a strategy of change in place, then you're going to need digital transformation at some point. If you're an e-commerce, pure play e-commerce business, no matter what it is you're selling, and you don't respond to changes in your marketplace or changes in your supplier network, changes in your business strategy, then you are going to find yourself needing transformation at some point. So the only people who don't require a program of transformation typically are those who are already undergoing a program of continuous improvement anyway. And even then, there's going to come a point where they probably need to do a program of transformation of some description. So transformation is taking everything that you have in a series of processes and transforming it, radically overhauling it. And so often, even in a business that has continuous improvement and a roadmap of continuous development built into its DNA, that roadmap will always deviate from what the rest of the world is doing, because you can't forward predict the future that far in advance. So they will at some point always need to say, we need to bring this closer together again. How do we do that? And that's where the transformational activity comes in.
And based on this, I think there would be a new, people always curious about this part. Like for you, when clients come to you, approach to you, usually what kind of circumstances they are in? What kind of obstacles they are facing? Because changing is the most difficult thing in the world. I don't think somebody just think, okay, today, I have a bunch of money in here and we don't know how to spend it. Let's find a
it's always the other way around. Always the other way around. And it is that, the systems are going out of date or they're not working. Security can be a big factor. So there's been changes in their need to be security conscious. They need to put extra security in. That's also a factor. New revenue streams, new opportunities being afforded by the marketplace. All of these things will drive somebody into a conversation with me. And that conversation is usually, because it's such a big task, it's very difficult for somebody to be able to make sense of that and make order of it. And again, the larger the organisation, the harder that becomes, because there are so many moving parts.
Okay, but when these people come to you, do you think they have a clear goal, or they just have a general good goal, but not a
Yeah, so usually not. No, usually they have some very broad ideas about what they want to achieve, and one of those things will be, we need to replace a system. We might use that to look at changing processes, but often they don't consider what the outcomes of that are going to be beyond changing the system and improving some processes. So they don't consider what level of impact they could actually have as a consequence of going through this. And that's really where the value comes from talking to a consultant like myself, is being able to draw that out of them and say, how does that impact relate to your business objectives overall, your overall business strategy? And then what else can we do whilst we essentially whilst we have the box open? What can we fix? What can we change? What can we modify that will bring you even closer to achieving your business objectives than if we just swapped a system out? Quite often, it's very difficult sometimes for people to quantify, the return on investment. But actually, especially in the third sector, so charities and membership organisations, that's becoming more value-led as a conversation. And by value, we don't necessarily mean capital impact, but actually, how do we move those businesses closer to achieving their aims and objectives for serving their members or their service users? And it becomes a much softer measurement. And actually, I think that's rightly so. I think there's been a real lack of any metrics in digital transformation other than very hard metrics, almost always cash focused. And that's not to say that it's not a good metric, and we need to think about that and consider it, but there are so many other things that we could be putting into that which could help that decision-making process. And that's the real challenge when you're a leader, is quite often these things are presented to you as very big capital investments for what appears to be very little return, or certainly very little guarantees over an incredibly long period of time. And if we know that 80% of digital projects fail, then the risk associated with that is massive. Whereas if you take a strategic approach and say we're going to do things whilst they have impact, and then when they stop having big impact, we'll stop doing them, then you de-risk that overall spend. And if you talk about doing things which have impact, not just on the bottom line, so not just on the cash that comes into the business, but also on customer satisfaction, the ability to retain members and service users, the ability to increase contact with them, provide better services, then that return on investment becomes much harder to justify at a board level, and makes it easier for leaders to be able to make a good decision about what they're doing with it.
Have you faced some situations that the employees are insisting it? Maybe they say, okay, it's too difficult for me to learn these new things. I don't want to learn it, and I didn't see any benefit from it. My previous working habit is very good enough.
Yeah.
And you guys say there are a lot of obstacles. I didn't say it. I think, did you face this kind of things? I think it would be a lot, maybe.
Yeah, sometimes. So for me, I don't necessarily consult in operational process change overall. So I advise on operational process change, but I don't then go and implement that. So I rely on a consulting partner who manages that side of things, but also there's an element of responsibility for the client, for the business to be implementing that change. But part of the discovery process, the conversation when we're writing a strategy, you do get that feedback quite often from staff. And there's a skill to coaching that conversation in a way where you can lead them into a position where they agree to try something because it is new, but they also agree that they could be limited in terms of its impact, and we can roll it back, or we can look to modify it depending upon how it functions. But coaching somebody, and that's one of my skills, can get us to a point where they are at least ready to accept that they will try change.
Can you give our audience like 2 or 3
examples?
Methods?
Yeah.
Yes, examples with the methods. Like when they face some obstacles in their work, what should they do? Coaching people is very essential and difficult.
Yeah. So coaching techniques. So coaching is...
and especially for, embarrassing something new, some change,
Coaching is about asking very big, broad, open-ended questions and allowing the person being coached to find the answer in those questions. So if I make a suggestion to, let's use Xero for generating all of our payments. So we'll not just create the invoices, but we'll automatically take payments on there. And the finance person says, we've always followed up on the invoices. We take a personal payment, we make sure it goes through, we make sure the details are correct. That way we ensure that we get the money. Okay. How much of your time does that follow-up activity take? And are there other things that you could potentially be doing with that time? And what you're doing by asking questions like that, you're presenting a possible benefit, a positive impact. So I get some time back. But you're also moving the question to a different issue as well. And that different issue is not just a question about change, it's a question about a positive change. What else could you do with that time? Where would you be able to put that time? So don't direct them into the outcome, allow them to consider it themselves. So it takes all Friday for me to ring all of our customers. Okay, what would I do with that time? I would actually use that time to set up the accounts for the following week, which would make my Mondays less stressful. And so through coaching, through asking big questions where we allow the client to find the answer for themselves, they find something that works for them as well quite often. And it doesn't necessarily happen in one question. Sometimes you need to go through a big series of questions and move them around a little bit. And it may be that there isn't something which will allow them to fully find a solution for themselves, and you can start to just nudge them into directions if you see fit, but it's not often that necessary.
I really like your insights. How can someone in a junior or mid-role spot that signs that their company is digitally behind or doing something well? Do you have any idea of this?
How can they decide that they're behind?
Yeah, how can they identify, or let's say, are they good at it or they have some obstacles? Because I feel like in a lot of real life, usually it's not the boss to notice something wrong in this the front lines issues. It's usually the front lines employees, they noticed something, but how they report, how the boss react, that's a whole big stories behind that. So I think for some mid-role managers, it's kind of their responsibility to identify it and communicate the two sides. So how can they identify it? And do you have some suggestions to let any of our audience who are in that role to consider something related to their life?
Yeah, if you look at your day-to-day tasks, week-to-week tasks, and you look at what takes the most time, where you incur the most errors, where you have something that is taking more time than it should by comparison to your job role or job description, those things would benefit from change. So if my role, I've worked in client services for a long time, my role in client services is to provide a relationship management with a client. And some of that is about, I need to make notes and I need to store those notes somewhere. So if I have a meeting and the meeting is an hour long, I then take half an hour to create my notes at the end of it. And then I need to put those notes into an email, but also store them in a CRM, for example, and then put some follow-up actions against them. And then I need to communicate those notes out internally to my team as well as communicate them out to the client. So that 1 hour meeting is suddenly 2.5 hours of effort. And actually the effort at the end of it, so that extra hour and a half, has no real benefit other than just to keep people up to date on the fact that I've had a 1 hour meeting. The effort is not worth the value that it releases. So if I was having 8 meetings a day, I can't possibly create all those notes effectively and distribute them effectively and set the tasks effectively and make sure that all of that is in the right storage places in terms of systems and processes. My first thought would be that needs digitalizing as a process. How would I go about doing that? And the simple answer is just start with a web search, start with Google, because there are so many tools out there available. But I would be presenting that to my line manager as time that could be used elsewhere in order to better achieve my role. And I would frame it in terms of impact and value as well. So I'm employed to manage clients, but actually I spend half of my time managing internally, which means I'm not spending as much time with my clients. So let's turn that around. I want to turn that around. I want to become more in front of my clients, spend less time managing internally, although there's still a requirement of my role. It's not the primary requirement. So let's change the balance here. And that is how I would be starting that conversation with management.
I really like it, and it reminds me of AI definitely, because what you give the example, definitely now AI can help you a lot. So I want to ask you, for you, 5 years ago, before the ChatGPT especially, before ChatGPT or now, the comparison between 5 years ago and now, do you feel any change about people's perspective about this digital transformation of their business? And what's your feeling? What's the change of your feeling about how you interact with these clients?
Yeah, I think that we're on 2025. 5 years ago is a really good marker. COVID hit.
Oh, yes.
and lockdown, and nobody was talking about digital transformation, really. And then it suddenly became everything to everybody because there was no alternative. I think the lockdown brought forward the pace of change by something like 7 to 9 years. So it was going to happen eventually. We would be in this sort of position where everybody was, talking about digital transformation as something that all businesses needed, not just the biggest businesses. We would have been in this position where more business was conducted online than offline, and that would have happened, but it would have happened much more slowly. And I also am not convinced that it would have happened in 7 to 9 years. I actually think it would have happened potentially slower than that, because I think there will always be an element of resistance. But we were forced into it. It had to happen. And what that did was two things. It showed lots of people that there was an opportunity, and businesses being businesses, they like an opportunity. And then the other thing that it did, and this is what we're seeing now with AI especially, is that everybody who wasn't able to grasp an opportunity at that point, or who grasped that opportunity and then has sat on it and not changed since, is now frightened that they're being left behind, because the pace of change isn't slowing down, it is getting faster, and people are not prepared for that rate. They can't keep up with it, and that worries them, and rightly so in some ways. I think people do need to be mindful that they can't fall behind, because competition is getting fiercer. Somebody at a conference the other day described new business wins as hard-fought pounds. Everything is fought for. There is no easy income at the moment. The economy is difficult. Trading conditions are difficult, and the people who are looking at how their businesses function and trying to improve them incrementally, continuously, and with evidence of the impact of that change, so they can make decisions. Proper data-based analytical decision-making processes are winning faster than anyone has ever seen. It's really difficult to keep up with that.
Okay, I really love it. And then suddenly, I realized there is one interesting of our podcast. 90% of guests having something really surprised during the COVID. No matter for jewelry, for biscuits. That's something I truly just found it in my podcast. Like, what were you doing? You're dealing with several clients or something, and when you notice that suddenly the market is getting better. What was your forecasting at that time? Because at that time, nobody know when it's gonna finish.
Where I was working when lockdown was announced, so we went through Christmas, there was a lot of nerves about it, and then they announced lockdown in the end of March. The business I worked for, we lost half our clients overnight. So we walked into work on the Monday and the work had stopped because half our client base were doing the majority of their transactions in real life, physical. They had shops, car showrooms, warehouses, and whilst there was a lot of... So here's the thing, there was a lot of talk in the digital industry about needing to transform digitally and become more visible online and better at transacting. But businesses were slow to action it because they didn't see the benefit, but they didn't see the benefit for the risk because it looked expensive. And so what happened was that all of these businesses stopped and waited. So automotive, all the car showrooms, they just stopped because you couldn't drive anywhere, you couldn't buy cars. They had stock sitting on forecourts doing nothing. So they just sat on their hands and waited for 9 months. It's the worst period imaginable for them. And then there were the businesses who looked for another way. So I worked with a food wholesaling business, and they dealt with hotels, fine dining restaurants, the catering trade in general, but high-end catering trade. And they basically came to us and said, we are going to close the business and everybody will be out of a job. Big organisation, millions upon millions turnover, lots and lots of people, unless we can find a way of completely overhauling our business model and as fast as possible.
Oh my God.
And we took them, worked with them, and moved them from a B2B, so direct wholesaling into restaurants, to a B2C model where they were basically doing delivery to doorsteps. And we started with minimum viable product, and it was really basic. It worked, but only just. And they built a business out of it that enabled them to keep lots of the staff, keep the premises going, maintain a fleet. There was still cash coming through the organisation. The actual business model itself was unrecognisable. And they did do a sort of a process at the end of looking to see whether it would be feasible to continue that once all of the restrictions had been lifted. And I think it was a close thing. It's certainly not a done deal that they would close it down, but it wasn't their core business. And so when they were able to return to that, they focused back in on their core business. But I think the learnings from that were that they did then begin to drive more investment, time, resources into digital innovation and understanding how to protect themselves digitally in the event that something similar happened again, and making sure that their processes were properly integrated and rationalised as well. So it forced them into a position where they had to refactor things. And even when they turned that D2C, the direct consumer piece off and just focused on the wholesale again, it's given them internally a different appreciation for the process and the need for thinking in that way as well.
I really love this story, and it reminds me another little things that in my MBA courses, one of the professor asked them about, it's exactly what you said. What did you learn as a leader in your previous organization during the COVID? Have you guys sit down together and talk about, oh, we survived, what did we learn? And please raise your hand if in your previous company you had this talk. No one raised the hand. And you know, at that moment, actually I was a little bit shocked because, you know, it's in the mindset, you feel like, yeah, people should do that, definitely. But in reality, no, and such, because we have 60 classmates and we both been a manager role for more than 5 years, 6 years, and no one did that. And I heard in the classroom, there is a sound like, you know, everybody feel like weird, wow. But you learned something.
Yeah.
You guys had that talk.
Yeah, I think business had to learn very, very fast. You know, there was no option, and I remember very clearly the lead up to the first lockdown happening, and the leadership conversations that we had in the board meetings around, you know, trying to plan, and we were doing this on a nearly daily basis. We couldn't predict what was coming, but we made some good guesses about it. We started building in the ability to work from home into our processes, and giving people that opportunity and making sure they were equipped to do it. So when it did happen, then we were able to just allow that to take place.
Okay, now I think it's a time, let's narrow a little bit.
Yep.
Put the spotlight into these systems.
Yes.
I think no matter CRM or ERP or this kind of anything, again, people always heard of it, but some of them never, you know, use it properly. Especially when the people who work in small organizations, maybe they have their own like teams to do everything.
Yeah.
So could you like explain everything to us and make people can draw the picture in their mind about, oh, what is CRM, what is ERP, what's the benefit, and someday if I want to use, what should I start?
Yeah.
So let's start with maybe CRM. Like, can you just help us to understand what it is firstly?
It's just an address book at its most simple. So you have all of your contacts listed out, and then you can create relationships between those contacts, those people, those organisations, and all of the things you want to talk to them about. So for mostly, I want to talk to organisations about sales opportunities.
Yeah.
And so my CRM will allow me to create an organisation, and it will allow me to create a sales opportunity, and then it will allow me to create the communications between those. So it's just a set of records, data cards, but it is essentially just an address book. And if you imagine that instead of having an address book that goes from A to Z, and on page B I've got Mr. Bolan, and on C I've got Mr. Clark, and so on. I have a whole book for each of those people, and that book is split by the sales opportunities that I'm talking to them about, all of the conversations I've had with them, all of the tasks and actions that I've set against them, all of their responses to those tasks and actions, and how likely I think they are to respond to a sales opportunity. And then I might have other information as well. So it's a very big expanded version of that initial address book, but it does essentially the same thing. So it allows me, CRM, Customer Relationship Manager, it allows me to manage the relationship with the customer. if you reverse engineer it, that is what it's there to do. So I know who the customers are. I can control that relationship and remember everything. So if I'm dealing with lots of people or complicated relationships, then it's in one place. But more importantly, it allows other people to be able to see that information and to use that information. So if you and I are working on a relationship with one customer and you have a conversation with them and I don't see you until tomorrow, so long as your notes are in the CRM, I still know that that has taken place.
Yeah.
If the meeting is in the CRM, I know at least that you've had a meeting. If the email that you sent them following up is in the CRM, then I can read the content of that. So I'm not left in the dark. It means I'm not waiting for you, and it means I'm not stepping on your toes and anything as well. So it's a more efficient way of managing that big address book and then all of the retained knowledge in your head.
That's very clear. That's very clear. And is that any very popular system? Definitely. But a lot of companies, maybe I know, especially for small companies, they won't use this kind of popular ones. They just create, it's like a Notion or even WPS. It's just online and they put some basic things in there. So what's the benefit that they use this kind of professional CRM rather than that?
So actually Notion is very good. And you can use that as quite a powerful, essentially you're looking at relationships between activities and outcomes. Outcome is activity is call, meeting, email, and an outcome is sale usually. So that's all you're looking at, and you can create those really well in Notion. So Notion is a good starting point if you understand how to use Notion. What I would say is that Notion can be quite tricky to get into. What you find that most people will have, they will have a paper notebook, or they will have an Excel sheet. Excel is the one that everybody seems to use, so all the customers are listed and then they just put notes in against them. Moving it into a simple CRM, so something like HubSpot on the lowest tier, even Salesforce on the entry-level tier is relatively accessible. These companies build their software in such a way that it's easy to set up. It's in their interests to make it easy for you to set it up yourself. So HubSpot will walk you through all of the process, and it's really simple to get up and running for very little investment. And at its most basic, it will allow you to track your conversations and your meetings and all of your opportunities, and to build out a pipeline and to understand what the value of those conversations might look like.
Thank you. And another is about the ERP. I feel like ERP is more complicated than CRM.
I mean, in some ways, but essentially it's, if you think about the address book analogy, an ERP is like an order book and a stock control book in one place. And again, where you have all of that information related as well, so you can query it. So it is just, what orders have I got coming in? What's my stock look like? What does my purchase ledger look like? So, you know, when is new stock and what's my replen cycle looking like? If somebody places an order for 10,000 units of this item in March, have I got have I got the pipeline of inbound materials to be able to supply that and fulfill that order? And similarly, what's the impact? So it's something that allows you to make decisions at scale in the same way as your order book and your stock control ledger or your stock take ledger would. It's just more, it's easier to query, it's easier to get complex answers out of it, and it doesn't rely on you holding that information in your head, and you can have multiple people seeing the same data as well.
So it can be connected to a lot of departments,
Yes.
right? Maybe finance or
Yes.
marketing and the sales.
Yeah.
Can you describe it like a company, the 2 moments before ERP and after ERP?
So as a sales team, I might sell things that we not only don't have in stock, but which we can't resource in time, because I'm targeted to get a sale.
Yeah.
So I need to, as a sales team, I need to hit a target. So I'm going to hit that target no matter what. And then manufacturing team are sitting and watching that number of sales go up. And they're thinking, we can't deliver against this because there isn't time to deliver against this. And then you have the materials controls, the stock room, saying we can't get the stock in time anyway, even if we could build this. And so you have an organisation where the measurements for each business unit are set up to fail because they don't communicate with one another in a way that allows them to make good quality decisions. And actually in a business like that, all decisions are driven from the sales function. That's really common. And they're driven with no regard for the ability to deliver. So it's a really short term view of business growth, because all you're doing is trying to get cash in the bank. You genuinely don't have any understanding of how you're then going to deliver against that sale or against that cash in the bank.
That's very clear.
Thank you.
That's also very clear. Okay, next is about software as a service.
Yep.
Yes. Can you use the same way to explain it to us?
Yeah. So everybody who has a smartphone will be familiar with software as a service. It's back in the old days when you bought Word or Excel, you would buy it on a CD and then you would load that onto your desktop, and then it would run on your desktop and all of the processing would be done on your desktop.
Oh, the Word and Excel need to be that.
Yeah.
I thought it's only for movies. Sorry. I never think about it before.
No,
How do people use Word? Yeah.
It's a real thing.
Okay.
Yeah, so you would run the software directly on your laptop.
Sorry.
And all of the processing would happen on your laptop.
Yeah. And if I want to steal my competitor's business secrets, I can steal the literally physical CDs.
Yeah, so Excel, if you wanted to open, you would have a central storage potentially. So you might have a server somewhere with a file on it that you could read. And so you'd access that file and then you'd write back to that file, but that file would be on a physical server, probably somewhere in your building, and then you'd have a backup somewhere outside of the building, and then you'd have a backup somewhere else, so 3 points of failure for the backup. So software as a service, you think about when you download an app, you have the app itself does very little on your device. All of the processing happens quite often across Wi-Fi or across your 5G. So it's why most apps require an internet connection in order to function. So that's software as a service. The processing power is held. And this is the beauty of it. My phone is more powerful than the first computer I ever bought, but it's nowhere near powerful enough to run all of the apps that I use. Those apps, the processing power is handled in data centers elsewhere. So I don't ever really have that data or the processing on my device. And the same as on my laptop. I use a Chromebook because I don't need to download the apps onto my desktop. They all work in the browser. It's incredible, really. That processing power is leased from somewhere else.
Another part is some practical starting points for some small business owners.
Yep.
Yes, we covered something a little bit before, and let me try. If you had to advise a small business with a minimal budget, what would be the very first step for them?
Map out their process. Think about, if I were to bring somebody into the business who had no understanding of what I do on a day-to-day, how would I describe that to them? And it is a cliche, but use Post-it notes and put them on a wall, or use a chalk pen and write on a mirror or a piece of a window what the process is. How do I go from receiving an order to putting it into the systems that I need in order to make sure it doesn't get lost, to raising an invoice, to ensuring that the delivery of that order is met, to communicating with the end user or with the client that what is going to happen, not only what's going to happen next, but if there's a problem, and so on and so on. As a small business, I would be looking at something like that. How can I turn my everyday activity? I have to speak to people. How do I turn that into something that is automated? So I don't want to build a chat bot, maybe, because I don't think we're big enough, and actually I really value the personal connection. And there might be a language barrier. I need to consider that. But what I do want to do is to take notes, and all of the tasks that come off those notes to be automatically put into the ERP system. And are there, and then I just Google, how do I, and look on forums, see what solutions exist. And you can almost guarantee there will be something for one of these elements of your day-to-day that you can then digitalise and use that as a starting point.
Oh, that's really good. That's really good. I love it.
Post-it notes, every time.
And second is, are there low-cost or no-code tools that could make a huge difference?
No.
Okay, I love this. I love this answer, please.
So a lot of people,
It's an illusion of our
a lot of people will talk very enthusiastically about no-code, low-code tools and AI software dev and vibe coding. I think in order to be able to use no-code and low-code tools, you need a degree of competence in building software anyway. I think for the time it would take you as a small business to get up to speed with that, 9 times out of 10 you would be better trying to buy something off the shelf. The problem often comes not in building the first solution, but in fixing the first solution. The second problem generally when people use these tools is not in then getting the first solution to work, it's in preventing it from breaking a lot further down the line as the business scales. So how do you build something that is able to scale? AI development tools are very good at creating lots of code very quickly, but the quality of that tends not to be good at scale and tends to break quite easily. And again, I think it's something where it only really gives you an advantage if you already have some degree of competence in coding. For most people, and I include myself in this, as somebody who works in the industry and has a degree of experience of using these tools, I would look for off-the-shelf first, and no-code, low-code, and AI-generated code as a last resort, or get somebody else involved in order to do it if I needed something building bespoke.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question is, what's the one pitfall you've seen people fall into again and again?
Go for the biggest thing first. And quite often it's the thing that they feel is making the most noise in their head or in their viewpoint. And I did some work with a charity where they knew that they needed to make change to all sorts of elements of their digital estate. They needed a new website, they wanted to look at their CRM, they wanted to look at their integration into other platforms, but the thing that they were worried about most was their donation management and payment management system. And that's the bit that they felt was going to be most difficult to resolve and most costly to resolve. And when we actually looked at the impact it would have on them as a business to change, it probably had the lowest impact. But they felt it had the highest impact, and therefore that's where their focus was. And I've seen this again recently with a membership organisation where they were looking at a very specific proprietary system, so a system they had built a number of years ago, which they fully expected me to say, you need to remove that at a cost of tens of thousands of pounds and replace it with something at a cost of tens of thousands of pounds before you do anything else. And again, the exact opposite was true. Although it presented risk for them, it had problems in it. The impact of tearing that system out and replacing it compared to the cost of doing it was relatively low. The impact and cost of completely reworking so much more in the business for considerably less investment was much higher.
Yeah.
So we just refocused them. We turned that thinking around. You see this in, again, organisations of all sizes. People tend to focus on what they perceive to be the biggest problem first. And quite often, it's not. And quite often, it's not because they're looking at it from a cost-first perspective. This is going to be a problem because it's going to be expensive. Whereas if you think about the impact, then that changes the conversation. This is going to, if the impact is, it's just going to keep us on the straight and narrow and it's not going to fall over for 3 years, then look at other things every time.
Yeah.
You know, if you think about the idea of marginal gains, 1% improvement. If I find 10 things where I can make a 1% improvement and they cost me 10% of making the big change, which only gets me a 5% improvement, then I win. And actually managing small change is much easier as well. So I would always try and find the little things where I can make little changes, a lot of them, and compound the impact of that rather than the big thing. It's not to say that it isn't sometimes a problem and you do need to tackle it, but the question is, what do organisations, always assume is going to be, what's the pitfall? And the pitfall is always assuming that the biggest, most expensive, most complicated thing is the thing that you need to tackle first, because it quite often isn't.
Yeah, that can also relate to the first question I asked you before about the small business owners. How can they improve without a big budget? That's what they can do from small things, but just need time to go through every process and identify what are the little details I can improve.
Yeah, and you don't need to do it for every process. Focus on an area. And just really look at one individual element of it, and where it starts handing off to other systems completely, or other processes completely, and say, okay, so we're just going to investigate this. We're going to see, instead of my having a notebook with all of my conversations down, what happens if I put a CRM in place? And that becomes your point of focus, and then you test it, refine it.
Yes.
See what the impact is, and then move on to the next thing, rather than, because the other challenge that businesses will often come up against is they try to do everything in one big program. And I go back to what I said, which is 80% of projects fail. 80% of projects fail because they're too ambitious, they're poorly defined, their outcomes are poorly defined, and that ambition leads to a length of time. And so if you had started on a project of digital transformation 3 years ago, then you would be slap bang in the middle of ChatGPT becoming really popular. So your project would fail because you wouldn't have built a project plan to accommodate ChatGPT. Whereas if you'd put together a strategy instead of a plan, which was we want to achieve these outcomes gradually and incrementally over a 3-year period, and we will take this approach to doing it, and we will review and refer back to the original strategy, and we will put
The feedback
incremental
loop.
change in place with a feedback loop, then you would have accommodated ChatGPT into your change program instead of change project, and it wouldn't have failed because you would be testing as you go.
So let's go back to the last part. If you could leave our audience with just one insight into digital transformation, or just one tip, like people always miss, what would you say? Maybe something you have already covered, but you can emphasize it twice.
I think
okay. You don't need to.
It is about focusing on small change and understanding the impact of small change, and not trying to do everything all at once. But also accepting imperfection. So we create perfect systems over time. If your goal is to turn a perfect system on, then you need to be prepared to grow and develop that system over a period of time. It doesn't just happen. So if you, as a business, even as a small business, if you've been trading for 5 years and you think about where you are now, and you think about where you were 5 years ago, there are subtle fundamental differences in the way that you do things that have occurred as a consequence of time. So expecting to put something in place next week which fundamentally, radically overhauls the way that you do business is unrealistic. It's much better to look for ways of making small change incrementally and to be able to test it, because your expectations are managed. It's easier. You stand far less chance of failure. You also get happy accidents. I didn't know we could do that, but, and that's, something. If you go for a really big shift in a very short period, the risks are really high. Your ability to unpick it from your systems is harder, and you miss all the good happy accidents because you're just dealing with the accidents.
What if for the digital transformation, is there too many documents, too many information? They are not really literally just related to urgency or importance.
No.
What kind of new dimensions I can use to evaluate it's like for urgency?
So we talked about this as the business objectives, and I raised those really early on. If you're just tracking cash value in, or you're just tracking efficiency, then that's really easy. But I think there are opportunities here to look at the metrics that you're reporting against and say some of these are not valuable. We can't, what do we do with these? I genuinely would challenge a lot of boards to tell me how much of their board decks they actually read. They see them, they see the information. How much of that information do they interrogate, analyse, and then act upon? Things are going up, things are going down, great. What do those things mean? What does it actually mean for you as a business? I don't think that happens as much as people would like to think it does in big organisations. I think it's generally information for the sake of information. So I think that actually there's an opportunity at the beginning of a transformation process to say, what information do we need? Not do we want, what information do we need? What's going to be valuable to us? If we need to make decisions about customer satisfaction, improving customer satisfaction, what information do we collect? Who's accountable for analysing that at ground level? So do we have a team that looks after the customer service function? And can they be accountable for the big metrics around that? And then do they just report a single metric up to board? It's a real opportunity to transform that whole. It's not just the systems that we put in place physically, it's the systems we put in place internally within our organisation to process the outcomes of those and to be able to make sense of it and to wrap it up into something that's usable.
Thank you. I really like it. I really like it. Thank you. I think that's